Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Chromebook Classroom. We are here for part 2 of Geeking Out with the Math Learning Center for Junior High. We might have had the new kid on the block in our first episode. We've got the OG of math with us here today, Mr. Darren Truffin. You have been supporting mathematics in ECSD for quite a while now, but why don't you say good morning and introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Darren Truffin, and I, like Connor, support math from grade 7 to 9. So I'm privileged to be here today, and hopefully we can extend on the Math Learning Center apps there that Connor introduced us to.
Yes, and I have to say, in part 1 of the video, my mind was blown, Darren, because we're showing what was traditionally viewed as maybe an elementary app not only could support some of that differentiated thinking and needs of our students, but he extended it up into like high school mathematics with the possibilities. And you're going to do something similar for us today, where you're going to show us how we can use one of those tools. And I'm just going to say, it's one of those tools I used to hate in my classroom, Darren. It was the geoboard, and it was a bunch of elastic snapping and kids doing things with it I didn't want them to do. But you not only have a digital app for us, but you're really going to show us how we can support that concept model for our students and why that's so important.
Correct. Yeah, it's. I think traditionally pre-COVID, the geoboard was controversial. It seemed to become almost a classroom management issue, and so I think the reality of the digital workspace and that element of how students communicate understanding, along with the snipping tool that Connor mentioned, I think provides some wonderful entry points for students to demonstrate a different type of understanding of their learning.
Well, I love this. Well, take it away. Let's see what you got. I'm really excited about this.
All right, so what you see on the screen is basically a landing page for the Math Learning Center. And for today's focus, at least for this session, we're going to continue from where Connor set the bar, which was we do know that multiplication is a little bit of a deficit for our students. And so the idea of how do we bridge or transition some common learning platforms or experiences is kind of the thought for this part 2. So what I'm going to do there is just enter the app, and when we launch the link to the Math Learning Center, which is included in the slide deck, I'm going to choose the web app or the Chrome version. If you're on the Chromebook, you can have that loaded. Initially, what will happen is it'll take you to this classic 5x5 grid. And very, very quickly on the bottom, the blue bar will have a whole bunch of features that you can pull from. I'm going to go quickly into the 15x10 pegboard. And the main focus for today is we're pulling from a grade 9 circle geometry question. So oftentimes people may not even be aware that inside the digital geoboard, we actually have a circular version.
I didn't know this. You're blowing my mind. Yeah. I had no idea you could use this one.
Yeah, and so the thought here is that, you know, with grade 9 being the focus and being a topic that I think sometimes students and teachers struggle with, we find that a lot of teachers really don't have access to the old compass, the old math kit in the little tin box. So I think this circular pegboard will help with a variety of different elements that I'll bridge today. So I'll go quickly back to the 15x10 board, and a couple of the features that I'd like to mention here is that instead of using elastic bands, what I'm going to do is just snap this digital colored band set here and count off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I have vertically a marking of 7, and then horizontally, I'm going to count off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the other feature that I could activate here is along the bottom tool, just got to check here, is that I have a little pen tool. And so what Connor mentioned in the previous part 1 of this series was that the students that have difficulty recalling larger numbers, and he started off with the 7 times 8, I've marked vertically 7, so I'm going to count off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then just do a quick scribble, and then 1, 2, and then I remind myself that vertically I've got 7 units, but if I wanted to partition this line, I can actually have it broken up by 5 and 2. Similarly, I'm going to count off 5 along the bottom and quickly recognize that I have an extra 3 left over. And so if I go back to my bands, what I can do here is snap a band. I find with the pen tool, it's a little bit clunky because you forget that you're on a pen,
right,
and rather than a pointer. So I apologize for that.
Take some practice.
Yeah, and these bands, basically what I'm going to do is just move them to partition this vertically, as well as grab another band, position this vertically. And I'm using a different color on purpose just because what this allows us to do is kind of use a mind's eye perspective of this. So, one of the outcomes as we migrate up through 5, 6, and then into 7 and 8, we're now talking about the application of fractions, like Connor alluded to, but also integers. So, the having the pen tool handy is helpful because what we can now begin to do is start to allocate signage along this partition line. So very, very quickly, I have here a 5x5 grid, and we know that I could physically count all of these squares if I was struggling with recalling that, or I could partition it further as shown in the partial product finder. But I do have 25 as an area. I also have a 2x5, so this is going to be an area of 10. And so again, going back to my pen tool, if I needed to write on here, I've got my 25, I've got my 10, I have my 15, and I have my 6. So just like Connor showed with the partial product finder, we could do a nice screenshot, and the student could then add this to whatever form of notes that they're finding useful for their digital portfolio. In the slide deck, I did create a Jamboard that has some of these backdrops where the teacher could share out that link, and then the students could copy and paste their images into this.
That's what's so powerful about these Chromebooks. It's, you think about it, a simple screenshot, and I can take and I can visualize the process of my thinking beyond just that product, just the answer that I'm going to get. And so I love that you and Connor have both shown how to make those visual connections, because I think it does support our students that struggle. But I love how you're able to extend this to other concepts. And that's what you were hoping to do today, because I still can't believe you found that circle geoboard. This can actually translate us up through to like actual circle geometry.
Yeah, so this is the point of the main point of the session, is that what we're finding from our discussions with teachers now that they've got some analysis of their common formative assessments is that they're now starting to see how even though there's some foundational gaps that students have, that these common experiences about, do you remember in grade 7 when we had a look at this, and in grade 8, and then in grade 9, even though the teachers may not be teaching those same students, if the department is coming and pulling from common experiences, then the transition from this square pegboard, which is a 5x5, very, very quickly, how I can segue into this is if I take a horizontal line, if I call this a segment, and the beautiful thing about having this interface where the students are working live through either the teacher actively on the board or them activating in a Jamboard, is that you can also formatively assess their communication skills and a vocabulary piece. And so very, very quickly, if I talk about this line, well, it's really not a line, it has a start and an end, so it's a segment. I can connect the dots, so now I can start talking about discrete versus continuous data. But then if I add another layer here, I can now start talking about orientation, and so that spatial element can be supported, whereas on the typical paper, oftentimes you can quickly find out how students handle spatial orientation if they're finding that they can't turn an object in their mind's eye. A simple fix is to take the paper and turn it. what you're going to see shortly is that if I can take a snipping of my thinking, then how I rotate and spin that becomes based on how I might have been presented with a shape. And so the point of using the white and the yellow is that if I can't see that this yellow or white segment can transform and translate, so in math we would say if I just shift this 2 units down, I translate it 2 units down, I can actually have them redraw this. Now, the point of doing this transition is that I'm going from an array and an experience that is multiplication linked, and if I quickly go into my circular argument, I can still backdrop this. And the one thing that we notice when you drop these digital bands onto the board with the circle is that it defaults from the outer edge, which we would call the circumference, right, and snaps to the center, which we would say the center of the circle. So a radius is formed. But if I extend this radius, now I have a diameter. I could have a chord. And so the point that I'm trying to make here is that by snapping on more of these bands, I can start to set some patterns in motion. And I think most people would agree that what's happening with these segments is that from the progression of white to yellow to orange to red to purple to blue, the distance is also getting smaller, the measured distance. We could also come from an angular argument by saying that, there is an angle that's formed between the center or this diameter and this band that's been colored. So the nice thing about the bands is that if I just pull, you'll see that it separates from a segment into now a triangle. So we have a third point. Right now it has a red X on it, and it will snap wherever there's a peg. So the key thing about this transition to a grade 9 question is that what I'm doing here is I'm in real time building these triangles that anchor to the center of the circle. And very quickly, I can start talking about that there's a common radius that's happening. So now if I want to jump into a shape and space topic, then I have equilateral triangles. And you'll say, well, hold on, equilateral means all sides being equal. And so then the question is that true? The yellow triangle clearly has a one long side and then two radii or radius lengths. So that's not equal. And so what happens is that the conversation and the discussion that you could have in real time with these students, I think, changes.
That's unbelievable. So not only can students use this as a student demonstration of learning tool, like you said, to take that snippet, you've made a Jamboard with some of those examples and things you're going to show us, but this is a very powerful instructional tool for teachers just to even have that conversation, that chance to talk about it, because I can see it happening. I can't see that out of a textbook, with just that sort of clip art we typically see.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think the one thing that people may not be aware about with regards to the GeoBoard is that the digital GeoBoard from the Math Learning Center does have a share code. And so the interesting element when Connor and I explored sharing slides back and forth is that I believe it's designed for a starting point. So what happens is if I press the share arrow, then I get a little automated code. And if the student types that code while I have my active window open, I can actually prompt the student on where I want them to start.
Oh, wow.
Otherwise, the Learning Center app just opens blank. So it's an interesting way to have discourse with the student as far as controlling where the start points are in some of these lessons. And the slide that we're looking at here basically is the grade 9 PAT question. And so, the linking of the straight segment or the circle or the chord and the radii and all of these shapes that are on this diagram, you can see that there's a lot going on. But the layering of how we transition from that common array model, that multiplication backdrop, is there if the teacher so chooses to make. We've added a slide in here with regards to what do GeoBoards provide opportunities for, and I've highlighted it in dark. It's basically to create shape, provide rotation, exploring angles, and concretely exploring properties for geometric shapes. So any of those topics that teachers are finding shape-based, and this is one of the reasons we wanted to start with multiplication, is that typically people feel that that's just a number. And so, you know, with students that are struggling to recall number, if you can bring that back to a concrete model and you can anchor it into a conceptual framework, there is now a visual tool that can be leveraged. This slide basically provides us a little bit more detail about the background of what's in the GeoBoard app. So I'm going to click through that. This is basically provided because one of the things I didn't mention was that on top of having the different boards, there is a feature where you can actually connect the dots. And so teachers and students may find that having that little image as a backdrop may support how segments are connected. Normally in math, we'd have grid paper, whereas the pegboard doesn't have the connected dots, but you could activate that if you so choose. And I have a little blue indicator that demonstrates how teachers can do that.
Oh, that's awesome.
This slide and the next couple slides basically deconstruct that product model. But I did want to kind of end off on this slide, which I think is demonstrating the important transition. So on the far left, we basically see the 5x5 pegboard. You can see in the middle left image a transformed blue line. And then all of a sudden, we now migrate to a common style of application of segments. Obviously, with the circular pegboard, we don't have that option of putting a horizontal blue line at the bottom. Now, in your grade 9 course, that's going to be 1 point of contact, so that would be a tangent. And then the point of going to the far right is to, again, demonstrate that progression of how these segments change. So is it that they change in length? Is it that you're talking about the angle that's changing? And so there's an exploration there that's handy. The last kind of element to this slide would be the impact of rotation. So once I've had that image snipped, then what I can quickly do is spin it. So the far right image here is for those students that struggle with taking this middle image and seeing it in their mind's eye. Because it's now captured digitally on something like the Jamboard that I will click to next, once I have that image, I can rotate it however I visually see that property that's been presented to myself in textbook or in notes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so this is the Jamboard, and I'm looking at the time, so I don't want to spend too much time here, but on the slide deck that we'll share, there's a quick link. So when we click that, it will take you to make a copy. And once you have the copy, you can then save that for yourself. And I've created 5 slides. You know, I backdropped the starting point of the 7 times 8 as an integer. I've backdropped the other bookend, which would be the grade 9. Both of these have been snipped. Then it's basically screen clipping of, you know, the array model. We've provided a regular rectangular board, and the point for this is so that, you know, if the teacher wants to activate the pen tool, I'm just going to choose the highlighter, choose a blue ink, and then I can just highlight on here whatever it is that I'm wanting to, sorry about the curve there, a partition. And so, you know, I don't have to use the pegboard in its digital rubber band. I could use the board this way as another segue into common experience.
That is, okay, can I show you a trick? Because you know how you're like, sorry for the curve. Do you know if you hold the shift button while you're inking, it makes a perfectly straight line?
See? I didn't know that. That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll do that vertically to correct this one.
I love it. It's just the shift key.
I didn't hold shift.
Yeah, and it just lets you make those perfect lines in your inking because it makes me crazy. I love that.
And we learn something every day. I like that. Thank you. And then slide 4 is again the board. So I'm going to try that trick here. I'm going to click here and then connect the dot, and perfect. So now I've got a chord, I have a radius, and if I want to change my color, I'll go red. I'll extend through. No, I didn't shift there. There we go. Now I have a diameter.
That is awesome.
So that's wonderful. Okay, and then the last slide is basically just having the snipping piece, and then having people see that this can now be rotated, right?
And see, this is the thing about digital tools. It's like, it makes it so easy to do those things we need to do that it is not that easy to just have this ready on paper, prepared. Like, I think it's more work to get this ready on paper for your students than it is to just have some of these digital supports with something as simple as Chromebook, inking, a Jamboard, and a math app. Like, so easy.
Yeah, the last 2 years, I think for everyone has been, the best word I can think of is interesting. And so we've been forced to modify what we traditionally do. And there's been a lot of positive that has occurred. It's just, we haven't maybe had a chance to celebrate some of that positivity yet.
I love it. Well, you're helping us celebrate positivity today, because I think teachers will be very excited to try these tools. I know for a concept that can feel difficult to teach sometime, which is circle geometry. But if you're wondering, yes, these slides are available below the video. Yes, you'll be able to get a copy of the Jamboard, the link to the GeoBoard app, and of course, just knowing that all of the different math resources that both Darren and Connor have created are available on their SharePoint slides as well. Feel free to reach out to any of us to be able to get some support moving forward. And Darren, thank you for sharing. I learned so much today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yep. And we'll probably make a few more of these.
Love it.
Quite enjoyable.
Awesome. Bye, everybody. See you.